down in the shop one day a couple years ago. Ed was like, "Len, take this bike out." It was one of those fat tire bikes. It's a lot of work. You wouldn't think that that much more tread would wear on you, but
Yeah, but when you're
More-
pushing a
more
lot more
drag.
tread, it's a lot more
Excuse
challenging.
me. It's 4:31 and you are live.
Okay, thank you. This is the meeting of the Common Council's Planning Committee. It's January 25th, and our roll call, Councilmember Risberger, I'm here. Councilmember Davies,
Here,
Councilmember Carson,
here,
Councilmember Drenick.
here.
Okay, and we have the mayor, we have Judy and Greg also in attendance. Did everybody get a chance to look at our brief draft minutes from the last meeting? Any questions at all? Okay, so we're just going to take it away. I'm going to turn this over to Gary. Gary wanted to discuss some housing needs with us. So Gary,
Okay.
floor is yours.
Okay, I'm glad Judy is here because I'll ask her to help me out at times. I didn't want to talk so much about needs, but I wanted to talk about bringing you up to date on the history of what we have done over the last 7 or 8 years regarding housing. I know that the committee has been talking about what kind of housing initiatives we can take to increase housing options here in the city. I saw that Mark put us an item on the agenda today regarding housing. And so I thought it would be worthwhile taking 10 minutes to give you an update of all of the initiatives that we have done in the last 7, 8 years so that you can get a better sense of what we have found possible and use that as a jumping off point to see what additional things we can do. So, and Judy, feel free to jump in at any time if I get something wrong, which is certainly possible. So I'm going to try to do this in more or less chronological order, but I'm going to go back to probably around 2012 was when the city started to really address the issues of housing needs. And actually it started with Dick Miller sometime around that time, called for a housing summit, which we held at the Center Street School gymnasium and had about 80 people turn out and pretty much brainstormed ideas for how to increase the availability of good housing options in the city. One of the first things we did was we revamped our zoning code. And that happened, I think, right around that period of time, 2011, 2012, 2013. And the actions that we took in our new zoning code to allow us to increase housing options are in the R2 zones, which are medium density zones, and that's most of our downtown, the center city, I should say, sections. You can no longer convert any duplex or multifamily house into you can no longer convert a single family into a duplex or triplex or otherwise multifamily house. And that was done as part of the new zoning code in order to preserve single family homes. So because there is such a shortage of good quality single family homes in the city. Also, as we're very much aware, short-term rentals were restricted to only certain zones in the city. And that to this day is somewhat controversial and there are various viewpoints on it. But the purpose of that again was to not allow houses, particularly in the center city, to be bought up every time they became available for sale by an investor who just wanted to put it up for short-term rental. The main concern being it would take more houses off of the market for single families. And the third change that was made in that code was creating R3 zones, residential 3 zones. And those are zones that allow for higher density. And the thought was to encourage the creation of multifamily homes for rental apartments because there are so few options for rentals right now in the city. One of the outcomes, two of the outcomes of that were immediate were on what is the name of the street where we built the housing visions that comes off of Church Street? I'm blanking on it at the moment. We built a new housing complex on that street right off of the corner of between West and Church Street.
Is that Washington?
Columbia.
No, it's on the other side.
Cherry.
Columbia.
Columbia, thank you, Mark. Columbia Street was designated an R3, medium density, that allowed the creation of multifamily houses that was not before. As well as up on Monroe, the senior citizen housing was developed and that was designated a residential 3. There are some others in the city as well that are designated residential 3 that have not been developed yet. But the idea was to allow the development of multifamily houses so that there were more rentals available. Around the same, just shortly after that, we put together a housing task force that Dick Miller put together. I was on that task force. I was on the zoning task force and the housing task force. And two of the things that came out of that housing task force, and Mark, you'll be interested in this because it ties right to what you were proposing, was we created a number of tax exemptions for residential properties. I don't remember the exact details of them, but I think there were, two exemptions were created. And I think that to qualify, it had to be a vacant building that was going to be renovated for multifamily. And I can't remember the number of units that it took to qualify. And that there was a tax exemption that went with that. And there were two of them that were slightly different. Now, here's the interesting thing, Mark, to know when you're about these tax exemptions. In New York State, we don't have the authority to just create a tax exemption. There are certain tax exemptions on the books at the state level. And if a municipality wants to implement one of those tax exemptions, they need to get approval from the state legislature. So in order to implement those what we had to do was we researched all of the available tax exemptions that the state offered, picked a couple that seemed to fit Oneonta. Then we had to ask Senator Seward at the time to sponsor a bill in the state legislature authorizing Oneonta to implement those tax exemptions. And the process probably took close to a year in order to get that approved. So we can't just implement any tax exemption we want. We can research what's available on the books. And then if there's one we like and want to implement and the council votes to implement it, we then have to ask the state legislature to just be a bill or attach to an existing bill and approved by the state legislature, which, as you can tell, is a lengthy process.
Mayor, for clarification, does that include
Yeah.
abatements or is that just exemptions?
What do you mean by an abatement? Are we?
Well, and I don't want to spend too much time on it right now because
No,
we
it's
can
okay.
talk about later on. But since we're on the topic, I mean, the proposal I'm putting forward is that we would not kind of reassess the increased value of a home and then raise that assessment rate for a period of time. So that's what I see as an abatement rather than an exemption.
A reduction as opposed to, yeah. And I think actually the ones we implemented, probably abatement is a better word because they weren't made tax-free.
That's from what I remember, Gary, that's very similar to what were.
Probably, yeah, but it wasn't for single family. It wasn't available for single family, only if you were, it had to be a vacant house that was going to be used for multifamily. So you're probably right, Mark, probably abatement is the proper word, not exemption that I used. And I don't remember the details of them. We can dig them out and share them with everybody. And the other thing that we did was we started every year, and actually I was the one who would do it. And I did it when I was at Opportunities for Otsego, working in partnership with the city. Every year we would scan the list of properties that the county was going to put up for auction in the city of Oneonta. And if we found any that we thought was worth our while to purchase, we would then go to the county board, and actually Dick and I would go together. We did it a couple of years. We would go to the county board and ask them to approve taking it off of the auction list and selling it directly to the city of Oneonta for the total of what was owed on it in back taxes. We did that with 2 houses, and I'll tell you about them in a minute. The reason we didn't do it with more, and it wasn't that successful, is because every year by the time you get to the auction, there were only about 7, 8 on average properties in the city that went up for auction. And we would go look at them, and very rarely was there one that seemed like it was worth the investment and the energy and the time to. It was usually on a back road, on a corner, quiet street where it would have a low impact. It was a house that was in very bad shape and didn't have a whole lot of potential. You put a lot of money into it and still wouldn't have much of a house. So we only picked 2 of them. And the 2 that we picked, one is the large 3-family on the corner of Ford and Spruce that is now a Housing Visions house. You may recall that that was an abandoned property. It was very derelict. It was falling apart. There were squatters living in it. And the city purchased that from the county, and we sold it to Housing Visions. Housing Visions put $500,000 into it. And it's beautiful now, 3-family affordable housing. The other one we sold to Opportunities for Otsego, and it was in the 6th Ward, I think on Gilbert Street. It was a house again in disrepair. And we sold it to Opportunities for Otsego. And the plan was that Opportunities for Otsego agreed to use their weatherization crew to winterize the house, insulate it, put in a new heating system, put in a new hot water system, put in new windows. And then we packaged it with the first-time home buyer grant and sold the house to a client of Opportunities for Otsego, who then was able to use the first-time home buyer. They were able to buy the house for like $25,000. It was the same amount that the city paid up, the OFO paid the city for. And we sold it then as $25,000 or $25,000 to an individual family. They already, for at no charge, the weatherization program had put in new windows and heating system and insulation. And then we gave them a first-time home buyer's grant of about $30,000 that they could use for additional repairs. So for $25,000 outlay, they got a pretty good deal. And those were the only 2 that we ever found that were worth purchasing. And it's something we can still do every year. We can, the auction list finalizes in July, and we can still scan it every year. And if there's ever a house that looks like it would be worth our purchasing, we can do so. The county has worked with us on that and is happy to do it for us. At least they were then, assuming they would still be willing to.
Excuse me, Gary, when was the last time we scanned the list? Like seriously scanned the list?
I was doing it my first couple of years in office here as mayor.
Mm-hmm.
And there wasn't anything that was worthwhile. And I stopped doing it, and I guess nobody else has done it since then. Judy?
We have scanned the list very recently because of the land bank, not
Oh, right, that's right.
Yeah. The city. And we did pull 18 Cherry off of it for the demolition. And the land bank paid for that demolition. They
Right.
purchased property and they paid for the demolition.
Right.
The land bank also has 2 other projects that they want to do with the city. Those, they're hoping to get some houses that, or properties that they could renovate. 2 more. So
So
we do
would it make,
look at that every year.
so if we went back to do this, or if we continue to do what we've done in the past, are we competing with the land bank now to do this, or do we just let the land bank do this instead because they're more efficient at it?
Can I take that one, Gary?
Oh, please do, yeah.
Okay, so it's kind of low hanging fruit for the land bank, and we would prefer that the land bank go after properties that we really need to break through ownership issues and
Okay.
real zombie properties that we can't get to any other way. If they're on the tax list or tax auction list, then they're not difficult to get a hold of and to purchase that way. So I think we'd rather have the land bank working on more difficult properties.
Okay.
Yeah,
so-
because the land bank has powers that we don't have to
Right.
acquire properties. And since we are able to do this, we're better off trying for them to do the things that we're not able to do.
Yeah, it might be worth going back and going through that list every year anyway.
Yeah.
The tax list anyway, because if we could, even if it's only one property every year or 2 that we could work on, and then sell it to possibly even offer it to one of the city employees, especially those that have to live in the city or near the city, it might be worth it.
Why don't you put it on a list for this committee to do that?
To review,
once a year.
the list?
Yeah.
Sure.
Now, one of the tricky things about it is that when they first come out with the list, it may be in May, and there may be 20 properties on it. By the time you get to the deadline in mid-July,
It diminishes.
there might be 7 properties on it. So you really can't make any decisions until a lot of people just pay the last minute, the money owed. They work to scrape the money together and pay the last minute.
Well, as we get into the spring, Gary, I'll talk to you and
Yeah.
if you can give me the contact info, who I should
Yep.
speak with. I can get that list, and then
Yeah, that'd be great.
that'd be perfect for this community.
Good.
Another thing that I think needs to be looked at is over the years since I've been there, I've been there 4 years, and since I've been involved with the land bank, which is almost that long, there have been some properties purchased off the tax rolls that are still sitting there, and I think that's something we should be tackling as well. And these are properties that could be renovated. They're in they're boarded up, or they need to be torn down, or something needs to be done with them. And somebody recently purchased them within the past couple of years, and they're still sitting there with nothing being done. And most of those owners are not local.
That's the problem. That's the reason that it's good for the city to buy these properties, because people buy them because they're so cheap. And then they realize what they have is not worth much, and then it just sits.
But then it's an abandoned property, and don't they get fined? if
Well, they
it's
pay
not-
taxes.
As long as they pay taxes, they can
No,
keep
that's
it
not-
empty.
Well, no, that's not what I mean. Don't we have a local law that if that property is empty and they don't register it with the city, they can get fined, and that's an increasing fine?
Yeah, well, it's not a fine. If it's, we have a vacant property registry, and you pay a fee for having a vacant property in the city, but it's not that extravagant.
I thought
That's
it
it.
increased dramatically. Go ahead, Len.
Yeah, but
Maybe.
Dave, to your point, I've got a property like that on Chestnut Street. The previous council passed an ordinance not an ordinance, a law that actually said you have a certain amount of time to get the work done. And if not, code enforcement keeps coming back, and as Dave said, that the fines keep going up and up and up. I have one on Chestnut Street that we're trying to get done.
Okay, good.
So Judy, do you have like a list of properties that you've been kind of keeping an eye on?
I have a list. It hasn't, I didn't update it this past year. But I have, yeah, the list was, probably 2 years old. Yeah, and some of those properties are the ones I'm talking about. They've been purchased, through the tax auction. So they kind of come off the list because they're not a tax auction parcel anymore. And then it's just a matter of, reaching out to, trying to reach out to the owner to see if they're interested in doing anything with the property. And we haven't done that. Because that's really not, well, actually, I take that back. We had reached out to the prior owners on behalf of the land bank to ask if they were interested in land bank, and none of them responded. And then some of those properties were sold to new owners. Can't remember if letters went out to them or not. Yeah, but actually I did reach one of the original owners who wasn't interested in selling. The problem is land bank doesn't want to pay very much. They either want to pay very little or they would like the property donated, and none of these people want to do that. But I do have a list.
And
It
There's
needs to
also
be
a
updated.
delay of when the properties are sold to where we actually can get the owner name. At least according to what Stephen was telling me, it's a process. It may take a few weeks before we find out who actually the new owner is.
And of course, one of the problems is whenever somebody's contacted by the city to say we're interested in purchasing your property, people see dollar signs. They say, "Oh, the city's got a ton of money," and they ask for a huge, ridiculous price. We went
Because
through
we're
that,
flush with cash.
yeah. But that's what people say. Oh, the government wants to buy it. Great.
Yeah.
I'll ask for a huge. Okay, moving along. I won't spend much time on housing visions. Everybody's pretty much familiar with that. That is something Dick Miller and I recruited housing visions here and worked to get that project. It has approximately 20 family units, affordable housing, 12 of them on Columbia Street, 3 of them on the corner of Spruce and Ford, and the rest are on Monroe Avenue when you turn off of, what's the name of the street that goes up the hill? And then Clinton, thank you. And then in addition to that, there are 40 units of affordable senior housing in the large building at the end of Monroe, just south of the college campus. First-time home buyers. I believe since I've been in office, we've had 3 first-time home buyer grants. Am I correct? Is that the right number, Judy? I think it's 3.
It sounds right. I was involved with the last one.
Okay, so we've had 3 first-time home buyers. To give you just a quick summary of what first-time home buyers grant can do, usually you get as much as $350,000 or $400,000 in one of those grants. You can offer grants in the form of a loan that turns into a grant to somebody who is income eligible and buying an inexpensive home in the city. The trick to it is that you have to be below a certain income level, but your income has to be high enough to get a first mortgage with a bank. So it's a fairly narrow window to find somebody who fits into that. But with each of those grants, we've managed to put about a dozen houses in the hands of families, local families. They would purchase the house for the asking whatever the asking price was. We usually look for houses that are under $100,000 or thereabouts. And we would offer a loan of $30,000. The thought is that the house is going to need a lot of work. The $30,000 loan that we give them is generally used to do the necessary repairs that the house needs. If they live in the house for, it's usually 7 years, and may be different from grant to grant, the loan is forgiven. If they remain in the house for 7 years, the loan is forgiven. If they sell the house before 7 years, then they have to pay off the loan. And I think it's on a prorated basis. So that's been very successful. Probably in the last 6 years, we've probably done close to 50 houses. And these are usually inexpensive houses that need work, purchased by local families, and we've been very successful at it. The other thing is they're competitive grants. It doesn't mean you can get them just by applying for them. We have been very successful, extremely successful in getting them, and partially that is because we've done a good job with them. We've spent all the money, we've put all the money in the hands of people, we've been very accountable in doing it, and the state usually rewards you with additional grants if you show that you can be successful with them. And you have to show the need. We also have a housing need, which has worked in our favor. We've also, I think we had 2 rental rehab grants. These were grants that we would give to landlords. And you had to have a certain number of units in each building. And again, it was a grant for about $25,000, $30,000, I think, each, or maybe more. Do you remember the numbers better than that, Judy?
I'm thinking it was 30 to 40, I want to say, and then you had to, including the admin portion.
Okay. So we received 2 of those grants. Each grant was again for about $400,000. And we assisted a pretty good number of landlords with as much as $700,000-800,000 to do repairs. Now, again, one of the requirements is that the tenants have to be below a certain income level, I believe. So it can't be for luxury housing. And then we had 1 home grant, I believe. Home grant is where low-income property owners, low-income owner-occupied houses, a lot of them are senior citizens. We were able to give them grants, again, probably in the neighborhood of $25,000, $30,000 each, to make necessary repairs to their house. And we had, I think, 1 home grant for about $400,000. Yeah, Judy. You're muted.
Yeah, sorry, we're trying to corral our dog before he starts barking. We also did that home grant with an AHC grant.
Right, that's right. So we had 2.
So we had, between the 2, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head. Frank, can you please do something with him? We had somewhere in the neighborhood of $700,000 between the 2 programs. And we were able to do 11 homes, and we were able to combine those 2 grants among those homes. So the one, I can't remember which is which. One had a lower income level than the other one did. It was difficult to find applicants for these because they also had a component where the value of the house, once the renovations were done, had to be worth the assessed value. So, and they had a limit on what that number could be. So it's hard to find the home that will fit where it needs enough repairs for the money you're giving it, but not too many repairs. So you're putting in, it needs too big of an investment for the value of the home. And then we had to find the income eligible people that were willing to do the program. But anyway, we finished it out with 11 homeowners that benefited, and some of them were in the $70,000 plus range because we were able to combine the 2 funding sources. So it really had a pretty good bang for its buck on those homes.
Thanks, Judy. And then one thing, I don't know that we've ever been successful in using it. Correct me if I'm wrong, Judy. It was, as a DRI community, we received eligibility for what they call a graduate first-time homebuyers program, where it meant that any of our local college graduates, if they stayed in Oneonta and bought a house, could get a first-time homebuyers grant. Did we ever manage to do any?
Yeah, I don't get the results of that program because that goes directly through the banks. But I did have a couple of people that contacted me, and I put them in touch with the state staff that handles the program, and the banks, and I had some feedback on them. And it turned out that it wouldn't work for them. Either they weren't getting enough of an assistance from it to make it worth their while. One of them was a part-time student. The program was going to give her a waiver to allow her to do it, but she didn't make enough money because she was a part-time student to get a mortgage, because you have to have a regular mortgage as well, and the graduate to home ownership program assists with that mortgage. So I haven't heard of any success stories with it, but I don't get the data, so I don't know exactly.
I think it's still on the books. I think we can
It's still on the books as far as I know.
We can still do it.
Yeah.
And then Brazee's and the Stevens building, were made possible because of the support that the city provided. I think the city applied for a Restore New York grant on Brazee's, and also did, I think, a loan or if not a grant to the developer. And Stevens, that was Restore New York grant also, right?
Yeah, 750 Restore, and then he separately got an ESD grant of 90.
Yeah, and did we give him a pilot as well on that? I don't recall.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't remember doing a pilot on that, Gary.
Okay, could be. Then we currently have the Downtown Improvement Fund. We have 4 property owners that the city is helping with grants to convert vacant upper floor housing into quality market rate housing. In addition to providing them each with funds, with grants through our DRI money, we also assisted Springbrook on the Ford Block building on getting a CFA grant to help support that as well. And then finally, there's the Lofts on Deet Street project, which we helped make happen by putting some of our DRI money into it to make sure that to enable it to happen. So that's a quick summary. There may be some things I'm missing, but I thought it's helpful for you to hear the history of the types of things that have been done. We certainly haven't been sitting around for the last 6 years just talking about housing. We've been really very, very active and aggressive in going after money and coming up with solutions to housing. But we still have a very big problem and challenge ahead of us.
Gary, I appreciate you going through this in detail, because I think it's, as I'm listening to you, I'm realizing I don't think we've gone through a comprehensive rundown of what we've done recently. So some of this is I forgot about. It's going back for quite a ways. I was there initially. Dick Miller kind of threw me in the deep end for the initial housing meeting with 80 plus people over at Center Street. So looking at all this list, I think we've come a long ways. I think some people have done a tremendous job getting us through, getting some of these projects to happen. And I think we owe them a debt of gratitude for that. So I did have a question on going back here. Oh, I know what it was. And this sort of ties into what Mark Davies had asked to be put on our agenda as far as tax incentives. Is that something, I mean, we implemented some tax incentives that were allowable by New York State. Do we know if has anything changed in the last couple of years, anything new that's come up? And maybe this is a question for Judy. Any other tax incentives that we could go to?
I think Rich Maxwell would be the person who we should ask to research what's currently available that could be beneficial to us. He's our tax assessor. He's our real property tax law expert. I think he's the guy we should go to. And if we want to find out, are there exemptions that we can currently go after? that would make sense for us, let him research them for us. Yeah, Judy?
Yeah, I wanted to mention something that we need to address. With our CDBG grants, if we have a community development block grant program for housing, or for any CDBG grant, we're supposed to have a fair housing plan in place. And ours is from like the 1980s. So, and they've got updated guidance on what that needs to include. We did do a resolution in November, I believe it was, that stated that we would be updating our fair housing plan this year. But I think it's something that needs a lot of thought. And if we're going to be developing some kind of a housing task force to address these types of issues, I think that should be a task for that task force. Because it's very important. We have to do it. It's a grant requirement on all of our CDBG funding. I'm asked about it every time that we have a monitoring visit at the end of any of our CDBG projects. And I'm to the point where it has to be done in 2021, or, they're not going to like that I keep putting it off. So I think that that's very important that we do fair housing. Basically, you're just addressing how to make sure that people aren't discriminated against, and we have a process in place, and we're encouraging basically good behavior by landlords, and we have a process in place for complaints, and if there's an issue, how are we addressing it and stuff like that. So very important, and it's something that we really need a number of different aspects, and people from different walks of life to be involved in.
Go ahead, Mark. Mark, oh, there you go.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I just had to find the button. The Housing Summit from about 10 years ago, is there still documentation of the outcomes of that meeting floating around?
Yes, there's a plan. Actually, right before COVID hit, and Katie, I see you're on here, you can jump in too, but Katie LaPerrichou had concerns about seniors aging in place in her ward and elsewhere through the city. So we had been starting to meet, Katie, me, Audrey Benkenstein, and I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank on her name. She just passed away.
Ruth Allen.
Yeah, thank
Ruth.
you.
Yeah.
But we had been meeting, I think, monthly, and we had been tackling, taking a look at that housing study and looking at some of the concepts that they had come up with and action items that they had. So I think that that's a good place to start.
That was the
that's
Housing
the
Task
housing-
Force.
I
was
have
the-
that in my email
Yeah.
that I could send to you guys if you want to take a look at it.
It's on our website as well, if you can find it, but it's posted on the website. It's called the Comprehensive Housing Plan. It's a comprehensive housing plan.
Gary, that
And,
came from you, me,
Task Force.
Peter, Lori, Ed. Is that
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, yep. That was the Housing Task Force. What's his name was on it that used to work up to college in the economic
Yeah,
development.
I've got a hard copy of it somewhere in a
Yeah.
pile next to me
Yeah,
here.
it's somewhere's on our website, Comprehensive Housing Plan.
Yeah, it was really good.
And that grew out of the Housing Summit.
Well,
Yeah.
I think it was one of
Sort
the
of.
things out of the summit was the development of a housing task force. And
For the larger ideas of the Housing Summit, I'm just wondering, sometimes, you get this large group of folks, everybody's energized, and there's so much that's put out there. And sometimes some of the ideas, they kind of find themselves in the recesses and don't get looked at again. So I was just wondering whether or not some of that documentation from that 80-person meeting might still be around.
if my recollection, Mark, is I think you're right. I don't know that anything came directly out of the summit, but it made increased awareness, and it resulted in us creating the Housing Task Force, and a plan came out of that.
Gary, if I remember this Housing Summit, the notes that were compiled by the different groups were funneled into the Housing Task Force, and we started with that. But then what came out of that was our final report, and we had to whittle down the ideas and what was doable. And so,
Good memory, Dave, because actually you're right. Each member, there were committees set up from the Housing Task Force. There were like 6 different committees, 7 different committees. And the chair of each committee formed the Housing Task Force. And I was on it, because I don't remember what committee I was on, but so Dick appointed a chair to each committee and they became the Housing Task Force. Good memory, Dave.
yeah, every now and then it works. Go ahead, Mark.
So are there any plans right now to kind of recreate another housing task force to, as Judy said, to address the fair housing plan and maybe to review the task force report from 10 years ago and begin to create some other recommendations moving forward?
We certainly could.
I think at the very least, Mark, we should look to reform that just to at least deal with a fair housing plan, if not more.
Well, it seems that there's a great opportunity here, certainly the fair housing plan, but maybe to just take another look back at what we've accomplished. And Mayor, I'll add to Dave's thanks for the rundown. That was really helpful. But to review that as well as to look at some of the recommendations and maybe come up with their own, because housing is one of these really tough issues that we've been trying to crack for a while, and we've been kind of getting at it in a variety of different directions. And these were great, and there's certainly a lot of really meaningful and valuable efforts that have been taking place over the past 10 years. But I think it'd be nice to have a plan or some direction for the next 10 as we, as a community, hope to grow and certainly draw and bring people into our community.
Gary, have we ever, or have you ever considered, considering the housing issues we have, like just to tack on to what Mark was saying, had you ever considered establishing a permanent housing committee to deal with the issues that we have, and then they could, anything that they work on could then be funneled up through the council, so we're not constantly trying to recreate as the council changes hands every 4 years, some knowledge is lost, and this way it's we don't lose that knowledge, and that the work is continually going on, working with Judy and whoever else at City Hall.
I think that's a really good idea. And Dave, you have just been appointed as the chair.
You'd think after 8 years I'd learn.
I don't know the difference exactly, but should it be a commission so that it's not just council, it's the public on it as well, with some council and a liaison from the city? Like
I think you're right, Judy. Having a liaison from the council is a good idea.
Yeah, because then it's
community driven.
And then it doesn't change when council.
We could actually make it an actual commission if we wanted to. I mean, that would be.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about,
yeah,
Gary.
But,
there's some other things that I would like.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's some other things I would like to see that do, in terms of, we need to be keeping like waiting lists for the different grant opportunities so that we know what the exact need is. And like, we have some grants that you need a waiting list of like 3 times the numbers that you're going to actually be funding. That means you have, like, for a rental rehab program, you need a waiting list of like 30 properties that the owners are really interested. They have the need for it. They would actually apply. And then through that, you pare it down if you get the funding and you fund 10 or 11 of them. That's where I struggle. I just don't have the capacity staff-wise to keep waiting lists like that current and keep that information out in the public. And that would be very helpful if we had a commission that could actually, be looking at all the different grants that come up, because you also never know what's coming up when, and you don't know what ones you'll actually get if you apply to them. So it's very hit or miss with the grants. You have to be just ready to go when one comes up. And if you don't get it, you've got to be ready to shift course to the next one that comes up. And you have to have your waiting list, and you have to know what your need is. And that's something that it just takes a lot of time. And if you had a commission, that's always in place, they could be keeping that up to date, and that could be another task.
You know, I remember what Joe Bernier used to do. He used to run an ad in the paper periodically for people who are looking for affordable housing to put in a pre-application where they put their qualifications in and maintain the list that way.
Yeah, we've done that. We did that. We did ads when MISPA was here. So that's a year and a half, actually 2 years ago this month. And we also have 2 different funding needs forms on the city's community development website. One is specifically a housing pre-application form for any type of housing, and the other one is just a general funding needs form. But again, it takes time to keep a database going. It comes into me in emails, and honestly, those are they're sitting there for when I have a chance to go through, and I'll go through a chunk of them, and I have not had a chance since Survive and Thrive. I'm still catching up from this summer. So, you know, that kind of thing is something I could use a commission to help work on that. And that would be their task to, you know, be ready to go and know what the needs are and have it all ready.
Well, I think that just looking at the history of where we started and where we are along the way, even though we had a housing task force, we had what was essentially a housing commission. I feel like we didn't have at the time, we didn't have the other half of this in play to keep that going. They could come up, their job was to come up with ideas and goals to set forward. But since we've had Judy here working with her staff on this, I feel like our knowledge has just grown at City Hall for dealing with this problem. It's grown tremendously. So I would certainly be in favor of establishing some kind of a commission, a permanent commission, to then now go back and be able to help out Judy and her staff with the work that they need to do. That's something that's would be in the mayor's hands. I don't envy you for trying to, if you decide to do this, to have to fill that, because I know it's already a challenge to try to fill our boards and commissions.
No,
But
I don't think it would be hard.
benefit.
I don't think it would be hard, but if it's going to be a commission, I think the council would have to create it, because our commissions are all documented in the charter.
That's right. It would be a permanent commission. So yeah,
Right.
that
So
makes sense.
so I think that out of this committee, you could make a recommendation to the full council. And it may have to go through a charter change. I'm not sure. We'll check with David to create such a commission. And probably should write up a brief 1-paragraph description of what the charge or mission of this commission would be. But I think it's a great idea.
Thoughts from other council members here on this? Can't hear you, Mark.
Yeah, I'd certainly support this. I think this is great. I think this allows us to actively address these issues and have a committee or council of folks, commission, kind of responsible for addressing this. I think this is the way to go. And this way it doesn't drop, which is the tendency with task force. There's a lot of interest around that time. You create some action items. Those action items to some level are played out, but then they kind of drop off. I think this would create some movement forward, which is what we need. We need constant movement forward. And frankly, we need, it'd be great to get folks helping Judy and supporting Judy's efforts. And I think this commission could do so. So I certainly am very much in support of this. Thank you.
Mark Drennick, did you have something to say also?
Mark Davies took every word that I was going to say, only a little bit more eloquently out of my mouth. Yeah, I'm absolutely in favor of this. I think it's a terrific idea. There are so many folks who have identified, as we all had coming in, that housing is one of the big issues facing the city, and the solutions are very difficult for anyone to come up with. We're all able to come up with a big problem we have is, and the solution is, I don't know. So getting the community actually engaged in the process of trying to determine solutions is going to be a win-win. Not only do we make some progress, hopefully, but also we get some engagement with the community. It doesn't feel like, at least those that I've talked to anecdotally, that it's as prioritized an item for us as it might be.
So here's what I would suggest we do. And Gary, if you think there's a better way, please tell me. Maybe if a couple of us want to volunteer to come up with the charge of what the purpose of this commission would be, and then in the meantime, and have that ready for our next meeting. And in the meantime, if we could find out if a charter change is needed, we could discuss this with Dave Merzig and find that out. And then we regroup at our next meeting. I think that while housing is a very big deal, we have a lot of really big issues here in Oneonta. It's not a new problem, so I don't think I'm putting it off a month to really solidify what we want to do is really going to have more of a negative impact. I want to make sure we take our time and do it right, rather than throw something together right now. So what do you guys think? Len?
Completely agree. I think it's a great idea with all the accolades that have been thrown around by Mark towards Judy. She needs help. And I think this will also help the mayor out. He's been at this for several years and been attacking the housing needs, but it is a monstrous issue on many different facets. Now with the pandemic, we're seeing folks leaving the urban areas, and we have a potential to coming to Oneonta, and so we want to make sure we take care of their housing needs. I don't think we're going to be able to take care of all of them, but what hasn't been mentioned tonight is the vacant homes. I know at one point we had 90 vacant homes in different stages. I don't know what that current list looks like today, but that the Housing Commission be actively engaged in this issue and creating those ideas. I know Mark Davies and we've had a couple of conversations of ideas floating out there in the community. What can we do to take care of those vacant homes? And I think this is a great idea, and I look forward to doing it.
Go ahead,
Dave,
Mark.
I'd be happy to work on that that charge if you like, and I would recommend that whatever we come up with, we certainly run it past Judy, make sure we get her input. So there's things I know that she says that we need to think about. So Judy, if you wouldn't mind taking a look at it, I think I'd be happy to work on that with you.
I'll volunteer to to contact Dave Merzig to see what needs to be done on the other end of this. Mark, do you need anybody to help you out with the paragraph or the charge or anything?
I think I can handle a paragraph. That's certainly
Okay.
going to get input from Judy. And
I
can run it
figured
past
you
her as
could,
well.
but I thought I'd put that out for you anyway.
I appreciate it. Thanks.
Okay. Anybody have anything else they want to add? Judy?
I talked a lot about grants in terms of housing, but the grants that we can get only help people of low to very low income. And there's a whole swath of people in this community that are above those income limits. One of the biggest issues I'm hearing around the city is finding affordable housing for families of moderate income. And that's something that grants can't help. There isn't anything out there, but if we brainstorm and possibly this commission could come up with some ideas for those. I know, Mark, your idea is for those, but maybe there's other ways that we can help. Steve Yearley has a map that he's done. I'm not sure how many people have seen it. We're over 50% of our housing stock is multifamily. And that's an issue too. A lot of them are for college. Many of them maybe could be converted to, or some of them could be converted to affordable family housing. Maybe if there's some kind of incentives for developers or those landlords. So, or building owners. So there's all kinds of things that we need to think about. It's not just for the low income
Yeah.
housing problems.
Right.
We have a lot of other types.
Yeah, and and Judy, I'm glad you brought that up because that's the hardest nut to crack. We have a desperate need for middle income or upper middle income professional people who don't want an apartment. Some want an apartment, that's great, but others want a house, and we just don't have the houses that people want. And there isn't a whole lot that government can do to make that happen directly, but what we can do is it's just really an economy thing. Those houses will get renovated when the economy is strong enough to justify it. And so what we can do is the little things to make sure the quality of life here entices people to want to live here, to create jobs, to support the business community. I mean, those it will have to happen organically to create those middle and upper middle income housing, because it has to make sense for people to invest in them. And for that, you have to have a top-notch quality of life, and you have to have a good business community and jobs. And so that's really the only way to tackle those.
And I think, walkable communities, they're one of the reasons you lose your neighborhood sometimes to your families is you don't have your school close enough for your kids to walk to.
It's all the little things.
All of those things are things that this commission should be taking a look at to see, what are things that we haven't thought about or fixed that can help issues like that for families.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good point, Judy.
Okay. Katie LaPerry-Shue, I know you're out there. Did you have any questions before we move on?
I don't think I have any questions. I just wanted to hear that discussion, and I just want to thank Judy for bringing up, that was sort of my impetus. Additionally to seniors was kind of the people who make just above the threshold for all the wonderful opportunities for assistance that we already have, but don't have enough money to, buy something dilapidated and fix it up. And so moving the middle, oh, am I frozen? So I just want to thank you, Judy, for bringing that up. And I'm really, really looking forward to the creation of this task force. And everybody's so on board with it.
Well, I think our hope too, Katie, is it's not just a task force, that it's a permanent commission. So whether it's a board or commission, I don't know what the difference is, if it's even, if it really matters, but I think having something permanent.
Yes, that's right.
Is good.
Sorry, I used the wrong word, but yeah.
No, that's all right. It's either way, I 100% agree with you. I think this is really important that we do this. So, all right. If nobody has anything else to add on that, I want to go next to something that I didn't know what he was talking about at first, but I've had the pleasure of riding my bike on a pump track in New Island, and it was exhilarating and terrifying at the same time. So Mark, why don't you go ahead and explain what your idea is about the pump track.
Well, thanks, Dave, and thank you for getting us on the agenda. So I think I sent the video that showcased what a pump track is, so hopefully you're able to look at that. But simply what it is a small little track, small, I couldn't even tell you the size. I can kind of look at that video and get a better feel for the size, where there's small little, I wouldn't even say they're jumps, but kind of camelbacks or kind of flattened, what they call tabletop type things. And the reason they're called a pump track is because what you can do is, cyclists can do is kind of use the downward force of going over these little kind of hills and push down and keep the bike going, and then use these kind of bank curves and basically sit there and do some little movement on it. We have, as Dave was referring to, a pump track that's been created out of New Island. It's not perfect, it's not complete, but it was put together presumably by some local folks to try to address some of the need for a pump track. What a pump track does is it offers an opportunity for new cyclists to go over some obstacles and to figure out how to handle their bike. It also offers kind of expert cyclists the opportunity for the challenge of pumping through the track without pedaling. It's a great way to learn how to handle your bike, how to maneuver through obstacles, move and shift your weight around. And it's been something that increasingly younger kids are finding quite a bit of enjoyment of going to pump tracks, or they might go to a pump track and never go beyond it, kind of racing around on those things and having a great time. I think some of the thinking was is that we have a developing mountain bike trail system here, and certainly the second proposal addresses that. And so this was an opportunity to try to kind of create another feature that would enhance or complement that trail system. My thinking was Neoa Park created a great opportunity. My thinking was that the skate park, near the skate park, would be great because it's kind of I think similar to the skate park and might kind of draw families and draw people into that area and just be kind of a neat little recreational place or opportunity for people within the community and hopefully visitors alike. So that's pretty much the idea of what it's all about. Mayor sent me over a article, which I attached to that proposal about pump tracks. I forget where it's located, Colorado, and you can kind of read that as well. But I think there's some real kind of neat ideas about the pump track. What the other thing is, it's low cost. So we're not talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars to create this. We're talking about moving some dirt. And I think, frankly, that the young people themselves do a lot of maintaining these things and enhancing them. And if there's areas that get a little low, it starts to fill in with water. Oftentimes they'll fill them in with dirt. So I think it's a great low cost recreational option that we could add to our city.
Well, Mark, I can certainly agree with you. When you said it's a way for new bikers to get better with handling of their bike, I would agree because I went through the pump track in the woods a number of times early, like last spring, and I gained confidence in doing those New Island trails after that, just because it really, at first it kind of throws you around, but you do learn how to handle your bike relatively quickly, and it's a lot of fun. My only question is, if we decide to do this, I believe it would have to be put on, it would definitely have to go to Parks and Rec for their input. We may have to put it on the Parks Master Plan, but I'm not sure. And then my only question is, how do we maintain it? And build it to begin with, but that's all. I think it would be a great addition if we just need to find a way to do it. Where you're talking about putting it in, that was originally going to be the dog park, which that's no longer the location of what we're discussing for a dog park, right, Gary?
I don't recall where it's going, where the location proposed is.
Yeah, Greg and I had
Right here.
some email conversations. So Greg.
Greg,
Sure.
go ahead and jump in.
I think, with the dog park on hold, when we put it on hold, we kind of looked at that again, and it can still go in either location. Where it's shown on the master plan, which is where Mark was talking about, the somewhat wooded area next to the skate park, or the other location we're looking at, which is a longer rectangle, like along where that trail is that goes from the Catella Park parking lot along Catella Park to New Island. I felt like personally, and this is not up to me, but personally, I think it's a nicer location for a dog park in the original spot. You've got some wooded area as well as some open area. But at that time, I wasn't thinking at all about the pump tracks. So that's another good use for that location. So
Would it make more sense to have the pump track in Catella Park, where the beginning of the trail to New Island starts?
Greg, I think, or Dave, I think there's a lot of, I think there would be some value to that, but looking at that particular site, I'm not convinced that we have, there's a lot of trees there. There's a grove of kind of old pine trees there. My concern is that with a new cyclist, if we had a pump track there, And let's say they were to get a little squirrely, as we say, on a jump or on a little camelback. I wouldn't want to have that tree as an obstacle. I think the other area has a little bit more of an open area, and so this would be a lot easier. Plus, I think the placement of the skate park is more square, whereas the area down in Catella is much more rectangular. So I think it would be a little bit more of a challenge to be able to create it. But I think I'm certainly open to that. I whatever makes sense and whatever works with regards to the master plan. I'm certainly not closed off to any of those options.
Mark?
I tell you, I love the idea. I might not be on it, but I love the idea. The idea, though, of putting it near the skate park, I'm very much in favor of. It really does provide, they're symbiotic. And so you'd be bringing families together, potentially, everybody's in one spot, much easier to kind of maintain, eyesight of, your teenagers. If they're all kind of clustered in the same area doing these activities. I feel like it's going to be a terrific opportunity for marketing. We're talking about those intangibles of a community. This is very tangible in a community that, separate us from others that somebody might be looking to move to. Let alone the people who live here looking for more quality of life experiences. So I don't know that impacts the softball field there so much, does it? But
I don't think so.
Yeah. So so that little area just off the corner, kind of along I think that's a perfect place for it. As I'm looking at it, it appears to be about twice the length of what the skate park is. But if it was laid out kind of like so, the skate park is here and this is laid out in the other direction, I think that's a real good use of the space. And, the dog, maybe Catella, who knows?
Mark, do you know about what size would be appropriate for like a municipal park sized pump track?
I don't off the top of my head, Greg. I could certainly do a little research on that and get back to you with that information.
Okay. Yeah, if I had just a general area, we can kind of look at what options, where it would fit, how it would fit.
Yeah, I think I need to go down there on my bike also and kind of ride it out a little bit and figure out what we needed as well.
Mark, in other instances, other cities that have put these in city parks, have there been any concerns or not concerns, any development where they for people that, because you're going to get people that know what they're doing with pump tracks and people that have never come across them before. Is there anything that needs to be built on the sides of that to kind of dissuade people from jumping into the middle of the pump track with their bike if there's lots of others on there? Or isn't that really a worry at all? It kind of regulates itself?
Yeah, no, I think it will regulate itself. And what we can do is certainly create a little sign that would provide some pump track etiquette or rules so that that they're following that. I've always marveled at skaters that they create a kind of internal rule system about who goes next and everything else. And so those are usually abided by. I think this would be the similar situation. And with regards to trying to, I think we can also make it fun, but without making it too big or too dangerous. I mean, I think it's the type of thing to create the perfect size that young children could get involved in doing this as well as, old guys like me. So I think we could kind of manage it by how big we make it and then certainly put some etiquette out there on signs.
Sounds good. So where do we go from here with this then? What's the plan? Send this to the Parks and Rec to get their opinion on this next?
Seems appropriate. Plus we'll have to, Mark, if you could just get some cost analysis on this, just let us know how much you think we're going to spend to get it up and running. How do you think the park itself would be developed? It looks like clay. Is that what it's primarily made out of?
Yeah, I guess we'd have to figure that one out, whether it's clay or dirt, but yeah, most of it is kind of in that area. And Greg, I think you and I could have a conversation whether we have, what we have available to us. Is there any way to be able to build it with things that we have available rather than purchasing any kind of soil that we need to bring in?
Yeah, I think we have some material we could probably use. We probably have to bring in some, for the surface, get the right gradation or whatever, but there might be some screening involved. I think we can probably do a lot of it in-house if with the right direction. We just need to talk to somebody or research how these are built and what grades and dimensions and all of that.
Yeah, and I can work on trying to get that together. If there's interest in this, I can certainly dig deeper and get those dimensions and sizes and perhaps even some schematic and layout so we could kind of work on that.
I know there's a lot of, like you have said, and volunteers that work on these tracks or the trails throughout the city and the town. Is this something that they would kind of take under their wing as far as the regular maintenance? So if something starts to get worn, are they going to kind of fix it, or is it something that people are going to look to the city staff to come in and like regrade things, reshape things frequently?
Yeah, I think we can certainly, I certainly can't guarantee that, but generally what we do with trails is that we put out on listservs some of our trail maintenance days in the spring and the fall where people get out there and work on it. Then the other thing is there's just quite a bit of folks that are out there in the trails maintaining them on their own, even not on days that we're calling. I think we can do the same thing, is just add this to our list of sites where on any particular day in the spring and the fall to get some volunteers out there to work on it. And then again, it's just a matter of folks kind of adopting it and wanting to do the maintenance when needed.
Mark, is it possible that since this is really this would be our first foray into something in the park itself versus out in the woods, that the level of maintenance could be different, and it might be that we just don't know until we get it built and see what happens over the course of a year?
Absolutely. I think this would be a build it and try to understand what we do with it, whether it can be addressed by folks with a couple of shovels, or whether we need to have once a year to have a little bit more of an overhaul on it using a little bigger equipment. And I could certainly try to do a little research on how other communities have handled this as well.
Okay. Do you think you could get some of that done? Did you want to go and talk to Parks and Rec? Because I'm sure they're going to want somebody to come and talk to them a little bit about it, what we're asking them to approve.
Yeah, I can certainly speak with them.
Okay. I can send a note to the chair of Parks and Rec and let them know that to ask them to put you on their agenda. Or Katie, are you there?
Hey, I'm here.
You are the liaison to Parks and Rec, correct?
Yes.
Do you want to talk to Parks and Rec and see if you can get Mark on the agenda for their next meeting next month?
Of course. Yeah.
Okay.
For sure.
All right. Cool. All right. Does anybody else have anything else about the pump track?
No, just Mark, if you want to just get in touch with sometime, we can just have a quick Zoom and maybe look at the master plan and talk about where it could fit and do a little research on the size of it. So at the Parks and Rec, we can show that to them and see what they think.
Sounds good. I'll email you later on today then, Greg. Thanks.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. How much time we have here? We got 15 minutes here. Creation of MTB trails. And I'm sorry, Mark, MTB stands for?
Mountain biking, sorry.
Oh, that's simple
MTB
enough.
mountain bike.
Okay. Creation of MTB mountain bike trails on Upper East Street.
Yeah, I probably should have said mountain bike / trail running / hiking trails, which I had in the description. So not that I have a one-track mind, but I've been looking at some of our land that we have here on East Street and thinking that there might be a great opportunity here to expand our trail system. We already have a wonderful trail system with trails in Wilbur Park and Homer Folks, as well as New Island. And by kind of allowing the usage of some of these areas here on East Street, would just open up those areas for recreational use with mountain biking, trail running, hiking, walking. And so that's
Where
pretty much what it was.
specifically are you talking, Mark, are you talking about around up near the reservoir or?
Up near the reservoir, but both of these are the road out to College Camp, Hoffman Road there. It's to the south of that, and then there is actually a private land on Hoffman Road, but also to the north of that is where some of that land is. So it's two different sections.
Okay, so this is on private land,
No. This is on our land.
on
Mark-
city land?
It's a city property, but there is a little small piece of Hoffman Road which is owned publicly or privately. But then we have a piece north of that. So our particular parcel of land, or the city's parcel of land, connects off of East Street and then connects also to Wilbur Lake Road. So in the diagram I sent out to everybody in the proposal, I took that off the tax map. You can kind of see where it is in relation to East Street as well as to Wilbur Lake Road there.
Mark, I think I missed that one. Do you have that available? Can you share that with everybody?
Sure, I think.
I think I missed that email. I didn't see that. That's why I'm a little confused.
I sent it yesterday morning, I think. Maybe it was Saturday. Let me see if I can share this. Is that sharing?
Yep.
Can you see that map? Because I can't see anything either.
Yeah, I can see the map.
So this is the road that heads out to College Camp. In fact, this property here, the arrows indicate, is College Camp. So this little section in here is privately owned. Actually, there's two parcels there. This is city property, the darker gray, and then this is city land. This little piece in here is also privately owned as well.
So are you thinking you want to have a separate trail system or hiking system on that property connecting to College Camp?
Well, I don't want to presume that we can connect to College Camp without certainly getting permission from SUNY Oneonta to do so, but I think there's some wonderful areas up in here that can be utilized with some type of outlet onto East Street in this area. And the same thing here, there might be an opportunity to build something up in this area and keep the outlet over here as well. And again, when I'm saying build it, I'm not talking about this be a city property. I think this could be something, if there was interest in this, is to organize the mountain biking and trail running community could organize around putting in some trails here and maintaining them much in the way that they do with New Island, Wilbur Park, and some of the others.
Len, go ahead.
Mark, I think this is a great idea, and thank you for bringing it forward. Really appreciate it. Our community needs more rideable space, hiking space. The darker parcel, how many acres is that? We get
Oh,
a
boy.
sense of.
Yeah, I had to ask Len. I think I want to recall from looking at this on the land. I think this is a 100 something, I think. Yeah.
Wow, substantial. And then the next parcel that has gradiated lines that goes around the private parcel, how big is that?
And I don't recall the exact piece of that as well. I'm sorry, I should have probably looked up the exact acreage.
I can't tell you that one because that parcel actually includes area on the opposite side of the road where the
Right.
police range is and further up. So it's a weird parcel.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. Yeah, that's exactly it. It includes a lot of different places. So I figured that was really the best place, and I wasn't trying to advocate for crossing the road into the area across the road. I think this is kind of keeps it away from the water areas and just really kind of utilizes. It's a nice uphill there. You could have some really nice kind of meandering trails to traverse the uphill as well as the downhill.
So I'm going to be devil's advocate for a second. Greg, is there any reason why we can't do this on the city-owned property there? Is there anything else that's happening there that we just aren't aware of?
No, there's no use for that property. It's just, I mean, the city probably bought it whenever it bought it to, prevent development from happening in the watershed. I can't think of another reason. You know, obviously we don't want major development there, but some bike trails would be great.
Well, this would be a great way to use the property, though.
Yeah, we had, if you remember a couple of years ago, the city and the town split the cost of a preliminary study about some trails at the reservoir, lower reservoir. And that would, I don't know if you know, the upper entrance or exit to the lower reservoir road, there's a little gate there that is an access road that goes to the upper end of the lower reservoir.
Okay.
So that, you know, it's already an access road that could be turned into a trail. I think people walk on it anyway, but we could continue that.
Right.
The expensive part was kind of cut through with like a boardwalk through the wetlands area and then connect to would be the west side of the reservoir. So between the edge of the reservoir and East Street, and come along the edge of the reservoir with a trail that would connect down to the other end of the road. So that could easily connect to these trails that Mark's talking about. And eventually, you know, I know that town of Oneana, Jim Hurtubise wants to widen out the shoulder on East Street to make it a little bit safer, easier for pedestrians and bicyclists to get along there without riding on the road because the shoulder's narrow now. So if you do that and then connect that to Meadowbrook Lane, and then connect to the high school, I had an initial conversation once with Tom Brindley about maybe dedicating some more formal pathways all the way across the high school property to connect to Wilbur Park that people, the general public, could use. That way you can bypass East Street entirely, not have to ride your bike or walk where there's no sidewalk. You can kind of get almost all the way up there without really riding on the road.
Mark Drenick?
Yeah, so that you kind of addressed one of my questions, which is I'm up to the reservoir quite a bit, and sometimes people are zipping right along, depending on the time of year, on a road that they're not all that familiar with. So I was wondering about trailheads. You'd want to have obviously two trailheads. You'd want to be able to pull a couple of cars in, I would imagine, as well. So I was just, I don't know that I have a question about that. It's more of an observation. And then the other observation is just the navigation of the Hoffman, road or lane or whatever that's called there, going to the college camp. I know I've taken that any number of times on my way into the college camp when I've used those facilities. And so again, I don't think people take that any kind of clip, but we'd be talking about just, as you do, you'd just be crossing the road. Again, I don't know if that's a question, it's more of just an observation, but so you're looking at one long hiking, biking trail. I'd be looking at it more for hiking trail that would kind of roll through both parcels, and you'd navigate Hoffman Lane or Hoffman Road. What is it? Hoffman Street? Hoffman Avenue?
Road.
Doesn't seem like an avenue.
Yes, let's say Boulevard. So you'd navigate that. And that's just, again, not a question, just an observation. But and the bigger question for me would be, in your mind's eye, do you see that we'd be able to pull a couple of cars off at either trailhead so that they aren't exposed on East Street?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. That's actually a great point. And frankly, I hadn't thought about that. So just to clarify one thing, these parcels would not be able to be connected because there is private land down through that space there. And then if we wrapped around through College Camp, again, I don't think we can presume to use College Camp. So I think they'd have to be disconnected. The connecting point would be for a bit on East Street. But the point you raise about the parking is great. I hadn't thought about that. What quickly comes to mind is there is already kind of the existing parking up near the lake there. I'd have to kind of look at how close that is to the property line and whether that can be utilized as parking or not.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if it could be, frankly. That gets pretty full, and people tend to kind of wedge themselves in there sometimes, not really, considering the fact that somebody might need to get out. So, but anyway, not to throw water on this. I think it's a great idea.
No, it's something to consider. Thank you.
We could do something similar to what they do in the Adirondacks at any trailhead system and just establish a very small parking lot at one end. Gravel, pack it down, enough for 4 or 5 cars. So something like this, where do we go from here? Gary, do you have any suggestions on how we start something like this? Because this is new to me. We're establishing basically on some level a new park almost. I think it's a great idea. I'm not sure.
I wouldn't call it a park, but
Right.
Greg, this is your baby.
Really, I mean, I think it's, we want to talk with the city attorney about how do you establish trails, or what do you, to put up some signage, trailheads, that kind of thing. I would want to have a conversation with him about that. And then it's just a matter of, I think, the questions that have been raised, determining if there needs to be parking and where, and who's going to build it. This is going to be built by the local group that builds and maintains all those. So there's really no commitment or cash investment by the city other than possibly a parking area. So not many obstacles other than, I think, just figuring out the legalities of it.
So Greg, you okay with talking with Dave Merzig about this?
Yeah.
Put this on the agenda for our next meeting. Mark Davies, have you discussed this with the mountain bike group yet? Or has this been an ongoing conversation for a while with all of them?
Yeah, folks are aware of this particular parcel and would be interested in utilizing this. And I certainly went and rode up through there this fall just to check it out and see whether it would be conducive to this, and it certainly is. So, yeah, there'd be certainly interest in building some trails here.
Mark, why do you seem fairly certain that SUNY would not allow college camp property to become part of this?
I'm not. It's not that I'm certain. It's just that I'm not. I don't want to speak for them,
No.
and nor have I approached them with this idea.
It's an underused. I mean, college camp is underutilized. I would not be surprised if they would welcome the idea of using some of their property to connect the two parcels.
Well, if there's
talk to the facilities people about that to start the conversation, or if you wanted to.
Of course, all they're going to want to talk about is liability. The same thing David Merzig will want to talk about. But look, we're a city. We've got so much liability in everything that we do. It's crazy to worry about liability on little things.
But they've got trail systems up through college camp everywhere. I can't imagine them letting the liability piece get in the way of this. I mean, do you, Mark?
Again, I don't know that I can speak for SUNY Oneonta in this particular matter. I certainly can agree that there's lots of trails and well utilized. But I think that this would need to be a discussion to see if there was some interest in doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because certainly that would address, Mark, A, some of your concerns about parking, and B, those parcels could be joined through SUNY Oneonta's college camp property very easily.
Yeah.
Is Hoffman Road a public road or is that a private road?
That's a question for Greg.
I thought it was private.
I think that's private. I don't believe that's at all public.
It's got a gate on it that should be locked anyway, but it isn't.
So there may be some issues there, but all these things can be explored.
Yeah, it looks like the first, I don't know, few hundred feet of it might actually be public. I'll find out.
Yeah, Greg, that was my thinking. I think that it is public for that bit. And then there was that gate that Dave was referencing, which I think is where the college camp property takes over.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Okay, so Greg, you're going to talk to Dave Merzig?
Yeah, I can talk to SUNY as well. I've talked to them in the past about connecting trails, and they're open to the idea, but we haven't taken it any further. But.
Okay. All right, I'll make sure this gets on the agenda for next month, and we'll see what kind of progress we can make.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, Mark Davies, I have to thank you for pushing this with me and sending this out to get this on the agenda. I think these are some really great ideas. So thank you for doing
Well,
that.
thanks. And this is just all about that quality of life piece that the mayor mentioned earlier. Dave, in the interest of time, in the interest of the fact that we are looking at starting up a housing commission, I would be happy to withdraw proposal number 3 and let a commission take a look at that.
Okay, sounds good. All right, it's 6:01. Unless, does anybody have anything else they want to bring up for a second? Okay. All right. Katie LaPari-Shu, did you have a question on any of this?
Nope, I'm all set. Thanks.
All right. Okay. Thanks, everybody. I think we made a lot of progress. I'm going to write this all up so I don't forget. And I'll see you guys later. Have a good night.